Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hi, 678, the phone number there. We don't have your name, but welcome. And who's that?
It's day delay.
All right. I didn't hear your name, but that's okay.
I'm going to be on mute, so I'm not disturbing one.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about expireds, withdrawns, and FSBOs today, obviously. If you have never been on one of our compliance chats, feel free to just speak up, say, hey, I don't agree. I don't like it. I totally agree. I need explanation. You're going too fast, etc. So don't be a shy group here. I don't get my feelings hurt if you want to tell me something. Hi, Natalie. And just feel free to interrupt and just jump in. This is supposed to be a chat, a conversation. I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to go through, but it does not mean that I'm the only one to speak. So feel free to jump in and say, hey, this happened or that happened. It's supposed to be a chat. This is only a guide as far as the PowerPoint. But I asked the few that were here earlier, if you've ever used expireds, withdrawns, or FSBOs as a source or even your main source of marketing and prospecting. Have any of you besides Kimberly and Rhonda that were here earlier? No? Okay. And yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves. Natalie, yes. I see you unmuted yourself.
Good morning. I'm sorry I'm late. I have been trying to get around this thing. I've only been a buyer's agent primarily. So my coach was trying to get me to do the expired and withdrawns, and I've been having a lot of hiccups and things like that with the do not call list and all this stuff. So I'm glad I joined today.
Awesome. Well, and I hear that all the time as I'm coaching people. I always hear that, or I don't want to call and get told off, and I don't, or the numbers are wrong, or they don't answer phones. Because what do we do these days when we get a phone call that we don't know the number? We don't answer it, right? I hope you guys do, because you're realtors, so we should always be answering our phone. But the majority of people don't answer their calls if they don't know the number, right? So the old school way of doing expireds, withdrawns, and FSBOs doesn't work, in my opinion. Of course, I don't fit most molds. So I don't like just saying, pick up the phone and call everyone, because I just don't see people answering those calls. Hi, Sada. And yeah, it's definitely a struggle when you're trying to do that. So I'm going to hopefully give you a couple hints and tips that might be a little bit different than how you typically are taught. So let's move forward and let's see. So obviously an expired listing is one that was for sale and didn't sell. I don't really need to explain that to you guys. And the withdrawn, obviously they withdrew it. And the FSBOs, we all know, are for sale by owners. Natalie shared that one of the struggles is, the do not call list. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Hi, Jacqueline. Because that is definitely, what are we told to do with expireds? We're told pick up the phone and call them, right? So we don't want to necessarily just pick up the phone, call, spend 2 hours calling and not even getting messages or getting to somebody that's just going to tell us off, because everybody and their mother's calling them, right? So we want to learn how to breathe new life into expired and withdrawn listings, as well as dealing with FSBOs and how to target and how to actually convert these into deals. Because ultimately, if we don't sell them, what difference does it make, right? So it's very important to effectively, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Hang on a second. It's important to effectively be able to market to these people. So we want to equip you so that you have the ability to target these expired listings and actually make them into a sale. And we're going to have some proven strategies. We're going to look at, I'm not making these up. These are strategies that have worked, techniques that have worked, not necessarily just for me, but for other agents that I've either met or know of. And we're going to convert these into active listings and ultimately close these successful deals, right? So to start with, let's understand, back in the day, especially I got licensed in 1994, we were taught expireds, withdrawns, FSBOs, right? You have to market to them. And I will say, I agree with that. That is always, always a constant. Because why? They want to sell. They wanted to sell at one point if they claim they don't want to sell now, but we know that they wanted to sell. And normally it's going to be not necessarily that something was wrong with the property, but that they had either too high of a price, or maybe the house looked awful, smelled awful, right? Whatever. Or maybe the marketing was just done improperly. But what do you think is the number one reason it doesn't sell? Price, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's always, I always tell my sellers when I'm listing a property, I can give you a $29,000 marketing point system for my marketing. But if you're overpriced, that marketing is going to mean absolutely nothing. Same with the condition. If it looks like horrible, why am I going to pay that top dollar, right? So price is really ultimately what it boils down to. I'm like, this isn't brain surgery, guys. I always tell my sellers, we just have to price it right. But what happens? Why do you think a house goes from being active to withdrawn? What's the number one reason? Anyone? No one? Wow. My crickets are going to start coming out.
Is it because the seller and the agent can't come to an agreement on the price or the expectation?
Expectations, great. There's no wrong answer, but ultimately what happens is you have 3 people or 5 people going out for that same listing, right? And you sit there and you say, oh, you want 400,000 and you want that listing so desperately, you take it, right? Even though it's worth 350. And sellers are normally not happy, correct, Rhonda? They're normally not happy, but we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But what I find, the majority of the withdrawns come from false expectations. It boils down to false expectations. You told them you could sell that property for 400, but every number out there showed 350. If you take an overpriced listing, that's going to be how you're going to make your seller not happy. That's how you're going to make that sale, that property stale, right? So it's real important. Now, the moment it states expired, withdrawn, or FSBO, the seller is going to get bombarded with calls, letters, visits, etc., by many agents. And what are they all asking? They are all asking, I'm just calling. Yeah. Go ahead. Okay. Who is talking? Was it Jacqueline or Rhonda?
Oh, they're gonna call and say that they're gonna, they ask them, why didn't it sell? Why do they think the property didn't sell?
Right.
Trying to find out what the issue is and then go ahead and give them a solution for it so they can list the house.
Right. And but the first question is, right, I'm just calling to see when you're going to be interviewing agents for the job of selling your home. That's a script. Yes. That's the number one script out there. I'm just calling to see when you're going to be interviewing agents for the job of selling your home. Well, they're hearing it from 20 different agents, right? Does that script just simply work, or does it just prove that all of us are the same? Right? That's kind of where it boils down to. Now, I am a scripts person. I love scripts. I think they're great. But for some, the scripts are the way to go. Like for me, I love scripts, but I can make them my own and I can create my own personality and pizzazz in them. But for others, if you're reading, hey, I'm just calling to see when you're going to be selling your house or interviewing agents to sell your house, that's not going to help, right? They're definitely not going to get the job. So you have to find whether you're one of those people that likes a script and has that personality and pizzazz that you can make that into your own, or you need to just dump the script and come up with your own system. But whichever way you go, we have to be consistent, right? And Rhonda said exactly what I was hoping one of y'all would say. Sellers are not happy, but don't approach the seller assuming that, because sometimes they don't even blame their agent, right? And sometimes they're not unhappy. So we don't want to, just like we tell people, don't just assume you know how I feel, right? So we don't want them to think that we assume that they're not happy, because who knows, maybe they just didn't show it. They had guests over there for the last 6 months and they knew that it was their fault, or they were told by their agent 1,000 times to take their photos down and to take their clutter out and all that, but they just didn't do it. Or maybe they blamed the market for the inability to sell. So one key thing that I can give you off this slide is never, ever tell a seller, I know how you feel, or even give that impression that you know how they feel. The goal is, of course, to set the appointment. So the main key is to establish yourself as a reputable source of information. Like I've shown you before, you want to show that you have the value, the expertise, the knowledge, the go-to to be that agent, right? So like one of y'all just stated a little while ago, we want to learn what happened, what is happening, why did it not sell? But we also want to know their motivation for selling. Let's find out what price they wanted. You know, I told that agent I had to have 400,000. I love when a seller tells us, I need 400,000 to sell it, right? Well, you know, I'm glad you need that, but what we can achieve, explain to them how a home is priced, and be honest. The more honest and direct you are, the more they're going to trust you and understand your value. But obviously, if they're interviewing 20 agents and 18 are telling them, oh, I can sell it for that, and then what are they going to do? Anyone know? They're going to beat up that seller, right? They're going to go in there and beat them up, beat them up, beat them up. Oh, you know what? The market just says it's not 400. We need to go to 350. The seller's not going to be happy if that happens, right? But we want to find out their motivation. We want to find out what price they want, because they don't need, they want, and the condition of the home. We want to have a conversation and be that source of value and demonstrate our value more than ever. We want to get that backstory as to why it didn't sell, in their opinion, right? What is their backstory? It's not necessarily the truth, because, you know, we know there's always more sides to the truth, but there's always your side, my side, and the truth, right? There's 3 sides to every story. But we want to know what their impression as to why it didn't sell is. And with that being said, we're going to find out what the market's going to bear, right? Now, what do you think this slide is telling us? We want to be their friend, right? We want to establish, not necessarily their friend, but establish a relationship with them and become their source. So if we look at expireds and withdrawn, what do you think is the first question they're going to ask you? If it's, well, let me rephrase that. Let's continue and then we'll come back to that. Check for withdrawns and expireds daily, right? We've all been taught that. Now, Natalie, you said your coach was telling you to start using expireds and withdrawns.
Mm-hmm.
Did they tell you to start using every day to look at the hot sheet?
No, so they did mention the going back to the old data list.
Perfect.
And just checking to see if it's been relisted or not. Yeah.
Correct. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, you want to check withdrawns and expireds daily, but go back 6 months, guys. Those are the best. They've had time to cool down. They've had time to decide and then find out what their motivation is now. Are they really ready to resell? But be compliant. Check if they're not relisted. A little trick for what you said, Natalie, as far as checking the do not call list. Do you know what applies to the do not call list?
Yeah, I finally looked at what doesn't apply, but one of the questions that came up 2 weeks ago was, does that include email? And I was researching that aspect of it.
Well, that's Can-Am. But here's the thing. You don't have to look at the do not call list if you're doing a survey. So if you're doing a survey, you can call anybody without checking the do not call list. So for instance, if you call that FSBO or that expired or that withdrawn and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I am Natalie Cousins with ABC Realty, and I am doing a survey in your neighborhood as to who would like to move from the area, or what makes you decide to move from an area. Or you could even make it less than that. You know, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm Natalie Cousins calling to see what you love about your neighborhood. You get me? You follow me? You don't have to call them and say, hey, I noticed you came up on the withdrawn list today. Or, hey, I noticed you came up on the expired list, because they already got 20 calls like that.
Right.
Even if it was 6 months ago, because not many people are calling back 6 months. But if you call them and say, hey, you know, I was thinking, if you were to move, where would you move to? I'm doing a survey to see if you were to move today, where would you move to? And then they'll be like, well, if I had the resource, I'd probably move to Hawaii. Oh, really? And what would make you move today? Well, I'd have to sell my house. You see, I had it on the market 6 months ago and it didn't sell, and and then you get into that conversation. It's a good soft opener. And that way you don't have to spend hours checking your do not call list. Obviously, check with your brokers always. Make sure you're good. They're good with that. But that's how I do it. And then I follow up with a letter. Make sure when you follow up with a letter, if possible, handwrite it. I have somebody that handwrites our letters, literally handwrites them and sends them. That way it just says, hey, you know, I noticed your house was expired. Just letting you know a little bit about me. Wanted to see if, you know, I could assist you, type of thing. I'm very non-sales, non-pressure. And they appreciate that. After that, I follow up with a pre-list package. I send something every day for 7 days with withdrawns and expireds. And then after the 7th day, that's when I call them. That's me. It works. When we first got into the business, we did it that way. It worked great. We continued doing it. We tried it 10 years later. It worked great. I've been lazy lately because I'm not really selling anymore, but I can almost guarantee you it'll work great. When I send the pre-list package, send your resume. Does everyone here have a resume? What are we doing when we go on a listing appointment? We're going for a job interview. You should have a resume. And you can send it saying, hey, I just wanted to send this in case you are in a place where you are hiring. And they will look at it and they will respect you. So make sure you do that. In my resume, I put everything, real estate and non-real estate. I also include brochures that I've done for other homes. I usually drop it off at their house, and I will knock on their door. If they don't answer, I drop it at their front door. Sometimes I'll use a courier. And in it, I also have an actual listing agreement in the package highlighting the important facts. They appreciate the transparency. I include the testimonials, the documentation, focusing on what the company can do for them, because they don't want to know that you have 10,000 letters after your name from the alphabet, right? First of all, they don't understand it. They could care less. The more you pump yourself up, the more most of the sellers, depending on personalities, will not even want to look at you. If it's a simple resume, just showing who you are, 1-page resume, that's great. And then, of course, with all the other information and focusing on the company and what the company can do with a marketing plan, they will appreciate that. You never discuss price on that. The listing agreement's blank, it just with the highlights of where, you know, things that they should know about, where the commission is, the length of time, what it includes, etc. Then if you have their number, I always follow up with text and I say, hey, drop something off at your house. Please take a look at it. Would it be okay if I called you tomorrow? What's the best time? 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock work for you? Always give them options. Basically, you're establishing that relationship. And again, you may not hear from them for those first 7 days. After the 7 days, I do follow up periodically about once a week and just check on them. If I determined from the start that their motivation was not much, I'll probably just put them on the back of my list, but I will put them on my drip campaign. If I have an email, I always ask them for the email at the beginning as well. If I don't have an email, I'll put them on my direct mail campaign, but put them somewhere and just follow up with them periodically. I have had FSBOs that called me 2 years later to list. I'm sorry, not FSBOs, expireds that called me 2 years later to list. So you've got to be in it for the long haul. Don't expect short-term results. But this is one of the scripts that's out there. Hi there, is this the homeowner? I'm so-and-so calling with so-and-so. I was looking over what's happening in our neighborhood. I noticed your home is no longer for sale. I was really surprised that it wasn't for 120 days without selling. I'm putting this out there just to show you what other people are saying. It has worked and it does work. But again, go back to, are scripts for you or are they not for you? Change it up a little, make it your own. And then, of course, if you look at the bottom, okay, I can just come by and drop off some things for you to look over, your pre-list package. I've been selling in your neighborhood, like to show you what I've been able to do for others. Around 2:00 tomorrow work? 99% of the time, they're going to tell you no, please don't come over. No problem. Just go and drop it off or send it with a courier. Here's another one. And you guys will have this. I'll show you the link. I already uploaded it today. And that will give you, again, an opinion of how to do one of the scripts if you wanted to do a script. Now with FSBOs were how we actually became very successful at the beginning of our career. Back in the day, FSBOs were literally, we didn't have the computer, we didn't have the online MLS. So that was a little bit more difficult, but we would go and take photos of the front of their house. And then we would make a brochure and drop it off. So you can imagine back in that day, this was in 1990s, they would literally put it on the front of their refrigerator. When we finally did go in there and list it, we'd see that original brochure there. Is there something we can do now for our FSBOs, now with technology being different? Anybody have an idea? Yes,
It's
no, maybe.
roughly the same thing that we do with expired. The lingo's just a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. And then, but there's a couple more things we can do with FSBOs. We can also create a online page for them, a website, a single property website. So if you create a single property, oh, my Alexa's talking to me. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know if y'all can hear it or not. But if you create a single property website, that could be something really good too. And that would be, hey, I just wanted to show you that I created this. I don't have it online. Keep it private. Obviously, don't put it out there. But you could ask them, would you like me to make this active for you? And just kind of do that as a service to them. That would be one thing. But yes, pretty much the same lingo. With FSBOs, what I like to do is I don't like to push them into the choices, right? Because we're expected to be the experts in the field. I like to just throw so much education and information onto them that they're like, you know what? It's probably easier if I just give you the listing, because you want to tell them, educate them, let them know what the disclosures are that they need to do. Did you know that you have to make sure that you disclose all latent defects? What's a latent defect? Things like that. You want to give them copies of laws out there, just bombard them with education. But here's the thing with FSBOs, guys. I love FSBOs because how many buyers does that FSBO need for their house? Anyone?
Just
How many buyers?
one.
One. Exactly. They only need one buyer. So what about all those other buyers that are going to their house? Why are we not monopolizing on that? That's how my husband and I got our business going in the 90s. We decided to tell the FSBOs, look, I want to help you get your house sold, and I am not here for you if you can sell it on your own. That's awesome if you can sell it on your own. Then you obviously don't need me, and I'll tell you how to get your license because maybe you need to become a realtor. I joke around with them. And then I say, but let me do this. Miss Smith, I know you only need one buyer. So how about I help you? I've got names of lenders out there that we can have them pre-qualify your buyers. I can have them possibly even come over here when you do an open house and, just kind of give them information. And then you could even say, what if all those other buyers that don't qualify for your house, I'll help you qualify those buyers. So you have 8 buyers that are coming to your house on that open house. Can I come over here? Let them know I'm a realtor, not your realtor, but I'm a realtor. And I will get them pre-qualified with my lender today. And if they can buy your house, I'll just give them over to you. But if they can't buy your house, are you okay if I just go ahead and help them find a house that works? We did that, and it ended up, we had a diagram back in a couple years ago where we checked, and there was one FSBO that literally would call us, and she was in a really hot area, and she would call us, okay, I have this buyer. Can you get them pre-qualified for me? And I would have them pre-qualified. We finally found a buyer that was really good for her house. But that buyer, guess what? Had to sell their house. So we sold that buyer's house. They went ahead and bought FSBO. She didn't want to use a realtor. She didn't want to pay us. No problem. They bought that house through her. But then when that FSBO ended up selling the house, she actually bought a house through us as well. From that one FSBO, when we did our whole thing, we ended up with about 9 different transactions. And from that one transaction, not to mention the other buyers that they didn't like their house, that house, but we ended up finding them houses. So don't look at FSBOs as just a way, hey, I have to get that listing. You might also get buyers from there. So don't forget to use that opportunity for a buyer as well. So obviously you want to find the FSBOs, and you can do it online. You can use RedX. You can use different companies out there. I do find that RedX is a good company, as well as all the others. It's a little pricey, but it pays off if you are using it. If you're not using it, don't do it. But in the meantime, if you want to start without spending too much money, because I always like to do things without spending too much money at first, just do a little bit of the hard work and search them online. Drive around, do whatever you want to do, but find those FSBOs and then stop by and or send them a letter. And just make sure that letter, like that first letter that we would always send them, was a, hey, I'm an expert in your neighborhood and I would love to assist you however I can. If you don't need me, I get it. And then I would talk about the buyer pre-qualification in there. I would put some points in there as far as how important it is to have your buyer pre-qualified. I would put some points in there about disclosures. I would put some points in there about the need of safety. Because what do FSBOs do? A lot of times they'll put their own lockbox on there when it's a vacant home, right? And that lockbox goes to God knows who. So I explained to them, be careful with that. You're giving that lockbox out to so many people. You don't know if they're casing the place or what. So that when you start talking to them about safety and things like that, sometimes they really appreciate if you would give them the advice of pre-qualifying the buyer. Establishing a relationship with FSBOs, that's the number one key. If you can establish that relationship with the FSBO, they're going to love you. Make it where they have a question about real estate. Guess what? They're calling you. You might not end up selling that FSBO. You might end up not listing that FSBO. But guess what? They're going to call you when a friend of theirs says, I need a realtor, and they don't want to go FSBO. Right? They're going to call you when they have questions about buying, because they might realize at that point, well, I obviously should have a realtor. So offer that value, give them list of attorneys, give them list of lenders, home inspections, everything. Communicate with them daily. Obviously, don't give them all the information all at once. Give them tidbits every day. Try to get their information from the get-go. Can I have your phone number? Can I have your email? But what is the number one key, or what is the number one question that buyers or FSBOs, expireds, withdrawns ask you when you are calling them to try to get that listing? It's, do you have a buyer? Right? That's what they're going to always ask you. Do you have a buyer? Can you sell it? And what do a lot of agents do? They say yes, and they bring their friend and walk through the home, right? Don't do that. That's actually unethical. Or they'll say, yes, I do. What in reality you should be saying is, I don't know if I do. I need to look at your house. I need to understand more about your house. Get in the door. The key is to get in that door. I might have a buyer for you. I have a database of buyers, but I don't know if your house meets that criteria until I go in there and visit it, right? So make sure that you do that. And then establish that relationship, communicate daily, offer that value, send your pre-list package, get testimonials from people, and also videos, guys. If you have their email, use BombBomb, send them videos. If you have their email, or find them on social media, because I'm a great social media stalker when it comes to FSBOs, also start finding ways to target them. And if you've been invited to kind of communicate with them, create a blog, create a YouTube channel, create any video you can that targets expireds or withdrawns or whatever it is that you're marketing there. And if you have their numbers, send them text. Follow up, follow up, follow up. That is such a key to doing what you need to do with them. So the other thing is teaching them that sometimes selling FSBO is not going to save them a lot of money, right? Because they think it's going to save them so much money, but they don't have the negotiation skills that you have. So if you can establish that you are going to be in their corner and establish the ability to show them that if they don't know how to negotiate, they might end up thinking they have to fix everything. They might end up thinking they have to provide a home warranty, or they have to give them closing costs. And have you ever had a seller, not necessarily a FSBO, could be anybody, ask you how much it's going to cost them to sell the house, and in their mind they were thinking it was way more? Anybody ever have that situation happen? You can put it in chat or state something, or just unmute. Nobody? I know I have. All of a sudden I'll tell them what they have to pay in order to sell the house through us. And they'll be like, really? That's it? I don't have to pay the buyer's closing costs. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. So sometimes it's just lack of information. Now, does anyone here struggle with rejection? Nobody? Everyone loves being rejected?
Yes.
Okay. It's like human nature, right? None of us like rejection. So before you start anything, mindset is important. But you know what the definition of no is? Anyone? Need more information. It just means they don't know enough. So when I used to get hung up on, because I used to do a lot of cold calling when people actually answered telephones and they would hang up on me, I would call them back and I was like, oh, I apologize. I believe we got disconnected. And it was great, because then they would be like, no, I hung up on you. Oh, surely you didn't hang up on me. I just figured you just didn't hear me properly the first time. So I wanted to make sure I reiterated it and just get your words in there. I don't know how many listings I got doing that. It was a good amount, because they just were surprised that I actually had the nerve to call them back. And they realize, I when they say that, because a lot of times they'll tell you, I can't believe you have the nerve to call back when I hung up on you. Well, that's the same type of oomph that I have when I negotiate the price of your home. And then they are like, okay, fine, just come over at 3:00. So you want to show them that that's just going to be something that you're just going to sweep off your shoulder. It's not going to bother you. They're not rejecting you. They're annoyed about so many people calling, right? So just establish yourself as that valuable agent, realtor that you are. So that's one thing that's really, really important. When they say no, they just need more information. If they hang up on you, make sure they're the first ones that you send a letter to. The more you push those, the more respect you're going to gain. I'm telling you from experience. They will see you as being that strong agent. If you're a mouse and you don't, they do that and you never call them back again, why would they hire you? Right? So obviously, I'm sure I didn't tell you anything brand spanking new that you didn't really already know, but it's more about establishing a system. I have it. I had in the past, when we did things with paper, I had a file cabinet where it had 30, 31 days, whatever the month was. And I had my FSBOs. I would pull up the FSBOs I was going to call, and I would I wanted a ratio. I always went with a ratio. So at the time, I think, because people were answering the phone, I would call, say, 20 people every day, figuring 10 would answer. Because back then, about 10 would answer. So I had those 20 FSBOs that I would work with today. And then I would mark it off with a check mark, and then I would move it to the next day. And I would call them for 7 days. So whether it be calling them 7 days, sending them a letter 7 days, dropping off a letter, knocking on their door, whatever it is, do it for 7 days consistently. And just create a tickler file. You can create that tickler file with a Google Sheet, with an Excel file, with your CRM, putting it on there to follow up for 7 days. The more you do that, the more results you're going to establish. And just keep following up with those same ones for 7 days. And then on that 7th day, after that final call or visit, go ahead and move them over to your CRM and put them on your direct mailing campaign. I'm telling you, you do that, you're going to succeed. One of the days, you could even send them a very short comp. I wouldn't give them a full comp, but you could send them a short comp, just stating, hey, I see your house is worth $400,000. If you want more information, feel free to call me. If you give them everything, they're not going to call you. If it's a FSBO, you might want to send them an article about FSBOs. If it's a withdrawn, you might send them an article about withdrawn. The National Association of Realtors website has tons of blog posts on that. So that would be something that I would certainly recommend you do. But what is going to get you that listing with FSBOs, expireds, and withdrawns is setting yourself apart. So let me open it up to you guys and ask you, what is something that you think sets you apart? If I was to ask you, why should I hire you above everybody else? What would your answer be? What is your unique selling proposition there? I want to hear from everyone on that one. Come on, somebody.
For me, it's the education process. I love to educate. So for any of these people, I'm educating them.
You're the authority on education. You're going to teach them the process. And don't be afraid that if you educate, you're going to educate them so much they're not going to use you. That's going to gain you respect. Michelle said knowledge of the market. Micheline, perfect. Yes, knowledge of the market. Establish that you are that market's expert, that farm's expert, that area's expert. And again, what I see a lot of people doing with FSBOs, withdrawns, and expireds is they are afraid to give them too much information. I agree with the comps. Don't give them too much on the comps. But to educate them and over-educate them, almost scare them with education, I think that's going to gain you respect, and it's going to have them call you. Anybody else have something else that would say, why should I hire you above and beyond everybody else? Kimberly, why should I hire you?
Yeah, that I was actually going to say, my response is usually a combination of both. My goal is to make sure that they're educated on the process from the beginning into the end, but also that I've engrossed myself with your neighborhood, your area, the market that we're in right now, but I provide that education, keep you informed as well, like where we are, market trends, neighborhood trends, days on market, your specific neighborhood, stuff like that.
Perfect. And you yourself have experience in buying and selling. So always include that as well.
Oh yeah, I did.
And then the other thing is people don't answer phones, right? How often do you call an agent and they barely ever answer a phone? So here's another little trick that I do. When I'm dealing with FSBOs, I have a Google number that I give them. That's one specific number and it goes to a certain place. And then I have another Google number for the expireds or withdrawns. And that way, when I see that number, I don't care what I'm doing, I answer that phone. You know, have a way to know who's calling you. If you can't do that or you don't want to do that, just make sure you're always answering your phone, especially because that is one of the number one complaints when you deal with expireds and withdrawns. That agent never answered the telephone. So make sure you're answering the phone. What about you, Natasha? Why should I hire you?
Hi, I was gonna say knowledge too, but then I thought about too, the marketing approach as well, making sure that you market appropriately, market the home appropriately.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Micheline already gave me an answer. Linda, why should I hire you?
I answer my phone. I was surprised when I did. I listed a home and I asked the buyer's agent for feedback, and he was like, "I love working with you. You actually answer your phone."
Right?
I was like, people are really not answering their phones.
No.
And he says, "No, I have to call the brokers." And I said, "Oh, I answer my phone."
Yeah, that's a big one, guys. As simple as it sounds, it's a big one.
That's a great one. I'm actually glad she brought that up because with all my listings, I try to answer the phone and I constantly get that like, "Oh my God, thank you so much." Like even if I'm annoyed at the fact that an agent is only calling to ask if the listing is still available. And I'm like, "It's active on the MLS, it's still available." But I answer the phone and be like, "Yeah, listing is still available." And they still are always like, "Thank you so much for asking." I mean, usually you get
Yeah.
more, "Do y'all have any offers?" Blah, blah. Like I feel like people kind of like try to probe you for questions, but I still just if my listing goes live, I already know the phone's gonna ring off the hook and I'm just gonna be answering back to back.
Hey,
And
Kimberly
agents are
called me from a
common with
cruise, so I know that's true.
that. It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kimberly actually called me while she was on a cruise because I needed to reach her. So yeah, answering your phone is huge. Jacqueline, why should I hire you?
The market of the neighborhood and my marketing. I answer my phone for sure, and I try to educate too.
Perfect. Yeah. And you can have a number of things. Rhonda, anything different? Whoops. Rhonda, I don't know if Rhonda's on sound. Well, Rhonda, if you hear me, just jump in. But yeah, I mean, that's key, guys. You're answering your phone, you're educating, you're giving them the ability to be the source of resources and information. If you can provide them with the attorney's information, because if they're paying for an attorney at closing, one of the things is they think they're being represented. They might not be getting represented. It really depends, and if they are paying for an attorney to represent them, I don't know that they're necessarily getting that much savings when they go to close if they're not using a realtor, right? But know your value and know how to explain that value. That's such key. Obviously, giving them local information about the market, understanding all that, that's huge. And then, of course, when they tell you, because you do run into this a lot, especially with expireds and withdrawns, and I say, "Hey, Natalie, the house didn't sell because she just couldn't sell my house." And you look at it and you see that it was $50,000 overpriced. How would you approach that?
So typically I educate on the market. I educate on what an appraiser will look at if it is going to be like a finance buyer, FHA or conventional. I just take that as an educative approach and have that type of conversation.
Perfect. And yeah, I mean, we can't badmouth any other agent, right? Make sure you never do that. But we can certainly say, well, unfortunately, it may have been priced outside of what the market will bear. And you can go there. You can discuss exactly what Natalie said, how a home is actually sold. And, a lot of times you're still running into, well, there's these appraisal gaps, so they can just pay above and beyond what it appraised. That's going to come to educating on the market, right? Well, the market, isn't bearing those appraisal gaps anymore. If it's VA or FHA, the amendatory clause is going to protect them. You can go there, explain to them everything. But one other thing boiling it all down in summary, you want to make sure that you create a system, whether it be with scripts or calling. And I should have made a chart for you guys in this, but you guys know what I'm talking about, where you say, okay, I'm going to call for 7 days, but don't overwhelm yourself, or call or send a letter or whatever. Don't overwhelm yourselves by selecting 100 FSBOs or 100 expireds. Look at the percentage, try it out for a month. Look at the percentage of answers you're receiving, good or bad. But how many people are actually answering your text, or how many people are actually answering the phone, or how many of those mail outs or knocks on doors actually worked? And then decide how many you're going to do every day, but keep it realistic. So you want to make sure that you're keeping that realistic. And if you see what Rhonda wrote, that's actually really good. I only market things in the area I work in because I have knowledge of that area and pricing. I do answer my phone every time, and I've been selling for 20 years and have a great experience. Yes, all those things are very, very important to establish. But again, the key thing is creating a system that is doable, realistic, and maintainable. What I find a lot of people do, a coach will tell somebody, start working on a FSBO program, and I'm not saying yours is doing this, Natalie, but I'm saying they might say, just go do it. And they don't give you a guide as to how to do it. You want to establish, what is that number? What is that threshold? Should I be calling 50 people? Should I be calling 100 people? Should I be calling for 2 hours and just make it a time constraint? I like time. What I normally did was, I'm calling for 2 hours. However many I get in those 2 hours, that's how I'm calling. Of course, if I'm with one for 2 hours, there's a problem. But I'm going to call for those 2 hours. And those 2 hours are strictly for prospecting. And like I said, I wouldn't recommend necessarily calling right now. I would recommend those 2 hours to be spent on writing those letters, stopping by, door knocking, etc. But figure out the number that is doable for you. And then literally knowing that, okay, day 7, I'm going to go ahead and put them in my CRM, and they're going to be maintained on my drip campaign if I have an email, or on my direct mail campaign if I don't. And then also, if I have the phone number, I'm going to call them, once a month or once a quarter, whatever you establish. But have a system. Don't just fly by night and say, okay, I'll call FSBOs today, and then you don't call them again for another 2 months. Because that is the key to success. What I see more than not is people don't follow through on the plan that they make. I'm going to do a direct mail campaign. They send one letter and then they never send another one. I'm going to follow up with those FSBOs. They call one time and they don't call again for 6 months. So the main thing is, and again, it goes back to what I always go to, which is a business plan. Create what your system is going to be. Is it going to be all FSBOs, expireds and withdrawn? Is it going to be just FSBOs? Is it going to be just expireds or withdrawns? However you're going to do it, they all pretty much are the same, in my opinion. You can market all three, but you decide what you want to market. And then find that marketing piece or ability that works for you. For instance, for me, we always did that single property website. I would do my best to get their information, their email, and I would email them one and say, hey, look, if you like this, I can make it live for you. Granted, I used to be a webmaster, so that's kind of easy for me, but there's so many easy ways of doing it now. In addition to that, I would do a QR code and I would put it on a little card for them, and I would take it over to them and say, if you want me to make this live, I can make this live. And that was something I would do. But give them something that's going to stand you apart, whatever your desire or experience or talents are. I'm a big proponent to use the talents and your strengths. If you are not one that likes to be on the phone, my husband is allergic to the phone. He always tells me he is absolutely allergic to the phone. He hates picking up the phone. So for him, I kind of forced him to call for a little bit. And I mean, it's hard for me to even get him to call anyone. So finally I said, okay, that's not going to work, but you get him face to face with somebody and he's fabulous. So for him, door knocking works. For me, I love staying home. So I'll pick up the phone and call, so you find whatever your talent, your strengths are, and you pursue those. Additionally, once you've figured that out, put it on paper and look at your numbers. Look at what's working, because obviously if something's not working, you need to make a change there. But additionally, when I say with the calls, for instance, I will call and just touch base with them. I will tell them, anything and everything, but then I always end with a call to action. So for instance, if I'm calling you and you're telling me you absolutely will not need me. Nope. I am not going to sell my house with the realtor. Absolutely not. No problem. But do you know anybody, whether it be a friend, a cousin, somebody from work that needs a realtor or that could benefit from my services? What's the answer going to be always? Almost always. No, I really don't. Really? That's my answer to them. Really? Not a friend? Not a relative? No one? And I prod them 3 times. I tell them, can you think of anyone in your neighborhood that might benefit from my service? And then when you prod them by the 3rd time, they'll either say, no, I really can't think of anyone, or I will keep your information. And if they do, I'll call you. I can't tell you how many times I have prodded 3 times like that. They absolutely tell me, no, I already told you no. Girl, I said no. And then later on, their friends like, I'm thinking about selling my house. This girl, she was so annoying and she gave me her number. I bet she's a really good realtor. Here's her number. And I've gotten that call. So the biggest thing is being present. Follow through, stay on track, and be present. You do that, you're going to succeed. And of course, this was on expireds, withdrawns, and FSBOs, but it works with anything and everything. I did, if you go to max1training.com, there's a little button. I haven't put much, but I definitely put today's PowerPoint and I think one other one. I'll upload all of them there where it says blog. I put the PowerPoints there. On Vimeo will be the videos. But if you go right there to max1training.com, it has the classes as well as under blog. It has the PowerPoint if you want any of the PowerPoints. And then here's my information. If you ever want to call me or discuss anything with me, that's that. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And we'll open it up for discussion. Anybody have an aha moment or anything they're like, yeah, that just, no, nothing, or disagree or want to share something?
I did have a question.
Sure.
So you had mentioned like marketing to the FSBOs, expired, so on and so forth. It's really, we could be doing them all at one time. And so with my time blocking, I'm just trying to figure out, I'm still having buyer brain. So typically in the morning when I get up, I'm prospecting the buyers. Then I'm looking at who I need to follow up on. Then I'm looking at what I have under contract. And with the buyers, if they weren't pre-approved, sometimes they would fall through the cracks. So now I've figured out a system for that. What I'm finding with the for sale by owners and the expireds is I'm using mixed methods of contact. So I might text them first thing in the morning or do a voice drop earlier in the morning. So when I get to my desk, I'm looking at who responded, who replied. But the setting out the package, setting out the pre-listing, all those things, if you don't have the budget for it, what are some ways that we can include that into our schedule, 1? And then 2, with today's climate, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to go knocking someone's door. So can you give some insight on things like that?
Absolutely. Great question. Well, when it comes to FSBOs, I'm not so worried about knocking on their doors, right? Because 99% of the time, they've got that for sale by owner sign that says, come on in, agents, even when it says no agents, right? So that one I wouldn't worry so much about. As far as the expireds and withdrawns, certainly I wouldn't knock on them myself either. You know, my husband has no problem knocking on their doors. But you could, what I do is I have the letters pretty much already done. So like I said, they're already done with the exception of dear so-and-so. So you can, if you're going to do them handwritten, obviously it takes a little longer, but for expireds and withdrawns, you know, you can go ahead and mail that first couple letters pre-printed. I just pre-print them, and I have packages that I already have pre-printed. I have them filed as day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. You could also, and that doesn't take much of a budget, obviously, because it's just a letter. Granted, mail prices have gone up, but and that's another reason I kind of keep it at whatever number I'm going to do so I can budget appropriately. I still have a ton of forever stamps. If you have forever stamps, those always work. I also, speaking of, just while I'm on that topic, try to get stamps that don't look businessy. And the envelopes I do always handwrite so that they open them. If you do have a little bit more of a budget, you can use postcards that are already pre-printed. You go on to Prospects Plus or Postage 55, I think it's called, Printing 55. I forget the name of it. But there's some really inexpensive printing companies that you can get postcards that are already done, and you could just create those as your day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So really, in order to answer your question on time constraints, you would already have those printed. So you already have your day ones. I literally even have them in an envelope where I literally just pull them out and put the name, you know, dear so-and-so. Obviously, the only difference when I do it that way is you can see where I'm writing in the name, so they know it's a form letter, but they know it's a form letter anyway. So that's why I'm not too concerned about it. If you do want to print them, you know, it depends on how you're set up in your office. You could always print them really quickly and just have them in folders, digital folders, print them real quick and add the name and do mail merge there if you're good at mail merge. Those are the ways I do it. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. If you have an assistant, your assistant's doing it. That's something that your assistant can do. But as far as if you're just starting out, I would say, you know, just block out those 2 or 3 hours for just FSBOs and expireds and withdrawns. But I would spend the very first hour looking for those FSBOs or looking for those expireds and pulling those up.
Okay. One other question as I have you here. The CRMs right now, they're able to pull as they hit the market as expireds, and that's what's feeding the CRM. Is there a way to program the CRM to go back to the old expired data, and would it scrub for the phone numbers? Because I think that's the bigger thing.
I don't think a CRM will do that. That's where Redix comes in.
Okay.
You know, I think Redix is about $100 a month right now. But it's definitely worth it if you make that. And again, like I said, try, you know, scrubbing it yourself for a little bit, but Redix, you're going to be able to scrub within seconds.
And then your skip tracing to get the phone number on because with the current expireds, they're giving you the phone numbers.
Correct.
But for the old data, we have to find the phone number ourselves.
Yeah. And even when they give you the numbers, you almost always have to verify them.
Right.
That's where I do like FSBOs, because they have them numbers already.
Got it.
FSBOs have always been my favorite.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or concerns or comments?
So I saw that you do coaching, and what I guess how do you charge for that? Because your girl needs some
Well, we'll talk on if you want to stay after everyone leaves, we can chat a minute on that.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, guys? All right. Well, if not, you guys are all welcome to go. And I appreciate you guys. Next week, you're actually going to have John Allred from DS Murphy is going to be doing the compliance chat, because I'll actually be at a Educators Association class in Las Vegas. Poor me. So But John Allred's going to be talking about appraisals. Definitely going to be worth looking at and listening to. I'll probably jump in if I'm able to just to listen. But yeah, definitely come back next Wednesday. Look at the classes at Max One Training. I have one coming up on brokerages and brokerage agreements. I mean, all right, you guys have a great day. Go ahead and feel free to jump off. And Natasha, you can stay on.
Do you mind if I stay on as well to hear about your?
No worries. Yeah, if you want to stay on, you're welcome. Tell me just stop the recording 1 second.